Hey guys, MTFU podcast number 7. Wanted to celebrate some good news today. We've been officially submitted to the iTunes store, and we are on iTunes now, so that's pretty cool. I'm pretty excited about that. Today I want to talk about something that resonates in my brain a lot. My grandmother as a kid and an adult always, she has some sayings that always rammed in our heads, and they say repetition is retention, and this is certainly one of those proverb that she constantly told us, and they apply to many aspects of life. So, without further ado, the title of this podcast is "Pride Goeth Before a Fall," and you guys may have heard that. If not, you should look it up and read about it a little bit. It's pretty interesting stuff. It's very applicable to most things in life. So essentially that means the overconfident or the too arrogant are likely to fail. So you guys probably know some people that, think everything's peachy keen and they can handle everything that's thrown at them, and they're very confident, overly confident about things, and they end up falling. So that's the pride, the ego issue that comes up with most people, especially people who are younger, tend to be a little more egotistical. I think there's ways of helping them not make bad decisions. And so knowing that proverb in my head, and when you make decisions and you mess up and that thing rings in the back of your brain because it's been said to you so much as a kid and as a young adult, is pretty powerful. So it's very very important to have things like this, these ethoses that we have that kind of ring true to the certain things that make sense to us. So there's a couple of things I wanted to equate this particular proverb to, because there's things, the way I look at it, there's principles, there's foundations to life, there's ethoses, there's these sayings that they're basically all repackaged. And whenever I see a certain thing that rings true, I like to kind of explore the foundation of that, right? So, I look at this proverb here, "Pride goeth before a fall," as like the foundation to a lot of the things, a lot of the quotes that you may have heard throughout history, and this is basically the foundation of that. So, there's I'm going to read a couple, and if this makes sense to you, great. If not, I'm sorry, my brain must work different. So the point of me getting through all this before I go any further is to understand that this whole man the fuck up movement that I like to say, this world we live in is becoming a little bit soft as far as I'm concerned. I think people are very they're too easy going with certain things, and they don't take enough seriously, and it's not all fun and games, and it's not all PC all the time, and the world's a bad place, a harsh place, and needs to be recognized as such. So this is kind of the flip side of that, and understanding when it's okay to back off. It's not okay to be aggressive all the time. I mean, obviously, I would like you guys to be aggressive the majority of the time, but there's some points in time where a wise person is going to check their ego, check their pride. So, I talked about this last night with my partner Jerry. We we have issues with clients, with emails, with new people, whatever it may be, and your first immature reaction is to be like, fuck off. I'm not doing that. That's bullshit. But then as you think about it further and you step back and get perspective on the scenario, which we've talked about a little bit, the perspective issue. When you're able to detach yourself from that situation and think what's the right thing to do, usually you go the opposite way, and your response is what is wise. So I look at reaction as ego, and your response is the wise man, right? So reaction is egotistical, and your response comes from a wise place normally. So real quick, a couple quotes that when I read, I think of pride goeth before a fall, right? You guys have heard these saying, you got to know when to hold them, got to know when to fold them. There you go. There's a whole song about it. That's a pride thing, right? You got to know when it's time and it's a losing battle to lay down your arms. You got to know when you're got a losing hand and the odds are stacked against you, that it's better to relent and come back and fight another day. In training, you got to know that you may be pushing it too hard in that particular day, or you're doing pull-ups or kettlebells and you ripped your hands. Like, you can't train tomorrow. That's an ego thing. You're going to rip your hands and ruin your training for the next couple of days. That's an ego issue. It needs to be checked, because the days you miss training are not going to be made up. You can't get back those days. So that's the kind of stuff that that ends up resonating in my head. So probably Goeth before fall. You got to know when to hold them, got to know when to fold them. So if that makes sense to you, cool. Another one that stands out. If you're not humble in this world, then the world will throw humbleness upon you. Mike Tyson said that, and what a guy to talk about being humble. I mean, you're talking about the best boxer in the world at one point in his career. Was a very cocky person, especially after Customato, his coach, they parted ways. That ego check no longer existed when he didn't have Customato. It seems like. I mean, I've watched the documentaries, I've read his story, so this is essentially my take on it. But you look at a guy like that who's at the top of the world that is humble. At one point, and then loses the humbleness, and then look what happened. He went bankrupt. He had to drop down lower than he's ever been before in order to realize the way of the world. So, humbleness, pride goeth before fall. There you go again, right? So, I hope that kind of makes sense. And my point of talking about this today is to be aware. And be awareness is stage one. There's 4 stages of learning I talk about a lot with my groups. And the coaching that I do, number 1 stage is essentially awareness, and is becoming aware. So stage 1 in the 4 stages I'm going to talk about it real quick, because I think everybody should know it and they should understand it. So I want to give you a brief explanation on that. So the 4 stages of learning, right? Unconscious incompetence. So you are not conscious of the fact that you're incompetent. I know that sounds harsh, but you're unconscious to the fact that when you're a kid, you jump out of your high chair and you fall to the ground, then it hurts. And then you end up doing it, and you become very conscious of that quickly. So the next stage is you're conscious of your incompetence. So you're now been made conscious of that act of incompetence. So again, you're a baby, you fell out of your high chair, you're now aware of the fact that falling out, jumping out of your high chair is probably not a good idea. So this goes on to the humbleness stage, the pride stage. Some people unfortunately have to learn the hard way that cockiness, that ego, that pride can very quickly have humbleness be thrown at somebody. So there's ways of being smart, and there's ways of manning the fuck up, and seeing that happen before it happens, and usually that's detaching yourself from the scenario. The next stage, after you are aware of your incompetence, you now start to work on your incompetence, and you are now consciously competent. So you're conscious of the fact that you're working on a competence, something that's important. So when it comes to, let's say you're a binge eater. Now you're conscious of your issue with binge eating, and you're actively trying to fix that problem. Maybe it's you're now aware of the fact that your shoulders are rolled forward, and it causes issues with your pressing overhead movements. So now you're aware of that incompetence, and you're working on it to make it a competency for you. So the next and final stage is the unconscious competence. So it gets to a point where you practice something, you hone a skill or whatever it may be, and it becomes second nature. The unconscious competence. You are now able to do it without having to think about it. Imagine driving your car, and so here's a real good example. I drive a stick shift. If I drive a stick, when I first started driving a stick, it was scary. Every little movement, every little clutch press, every little revolution in the engine, I'm thinking about what to do. Now I just shift, downshift, whatever, second nature. Don't even think about it. Think about some things in life you guys might do that you are unconsciously competent at, and you had to learn that trait, right? I think driving is a really good example of that. I think waking up in the morning is a good example of that. There's tons of really good examples, and I'm not going to get into that. You guys are smart enough to figure that out. But again, I just wanted to touch on this subject for today. You know, we always do it short here. I'm going to start interviewing some people that I find influential in my life, and I feel like you guys can get something out of, and people have certainly man the fuck up in their life. So part of man the fuck up is checking your ego. So let's work on that today. Check your ego. Remember, a reaction to a scenario is your ego. A response is that from a detached, wise position. So thanks, guys, for tuning in. Check us out on iTunes. Pretty fucking cool. Subscribe. Be great if you left me a review. Hopefully good. Got any questions? I'd love to help you out with anything. Shoot me a message. mtfu.co@gmail.com. Otherwise, you guys man the fuck up today, and if something arises and you need to check your ego, do so, because pride goeth before a fall. Later.